back to How's Your Book? I'm Cole.
I'm Marcus.
And today I'm doing another reading vlog. So my last reading vlog was for the 80th Edgar Awards Best Debut category. And today, or for the past several days and for the next several days, I'm going to be working on reading the 7 nominations for Best Novel. Yeah! Oops. The Big Empty is the first book that I finished. Yay! The Big Empty is published by G.P. Putnam's Sons. It's kind of a funny name.
Yeah, it is a bit.
Yeah. So Robert Crais is actually a very established author within the field. He's been nominated for several Edgar Awards previously, including within this series. And he also has one of their lifetime Grandmaster achievement has been awarded to him.
Mm-hmm.
So very well established. Book follows Elvis Cole, who is a private eye in Los Angeles. He works with his friend and business partner, Joe Pike, who is sort of a mysterious character, which I'll get into a little bit more shortly. Kind of like badass guy, worked in a lot of wars, reconnaissance, probably was a mercenary at some point, but like in a nice way. Very like hardcore, enigmatic, that kind of thing. Whereas Elvis Cole reads much more approachable. In The Big Empty, Elvis Cole is approached by Tracy Beller, who is a young woman who works within the content creation. She does like baking content that's really taken off. So she has a little bit more money than she did when she was younger. She is hiring Elvis to investigate the disappearance of her father, which happened 10 years prior when Tracy was 13. Father, Thomas, went missing when he was out HVAC servicing clients, and then he was never seen again. So he was missing, his work van is missing, and there's sort of no real, there's no clue. So for a long time, it was sort of assumed that he abandoned his family because the van wasn't found. But everybody speaks so highly of him, like, oh, he loved his family, he would never abandon them. So there's questions. And Tracy now has the money to pursue this. Elvis is unsure that he's gonna, it sort of sounds funny to just say Elvis. Initially, Elvis Cole is a little bit unsure that anything's gonna come of it, but he takes on the case. And he goes to the little town where the father went missing and is able to sort of pick up a thread that hadn't been explored previously. Instead of the last sighting being at the last client's house, he was able to pull out a thread where the last sighting was like a little bit later, where the father was seen with somebody else. But pretty quickly, that lead then segues into conflicts where there are like people following Elvis Cole and harassing him and trying to be like, get out of here, which is indicative of something going on. He gets assaulted pretty bad, where he's knocked out for quite a while. And when he's knocked out, his friend Joe Pike, his business partner, comes down and joins the investigation. Less so from like an investigating angle, but more additional boots on the ground, sort of like tactical backup. The mystery unfolds from there. It kind of goes in different directions that Tracy might not have expected. One of the things that's pulled out on the flap, it says the case flips on its head, victims become predators, predators become prey, and the question becomes, can Elvis Cole save them all from this nightmare? Really good. One of the things that I did found it very easy to read. If you see this on the shelves, one of the things that you'll find is that it has a lot of dialogue, short, quippy, fast, easy to read.
This does look easy to read.
Feels very realistic, where probably
it looks inviting. It looks easy to read.
Yeah. There's a few different perspectives. The primary perspective is with Elvis Cole, but then we also get these chapters where we are with sort of like a mysterious, ominous figure that we know is definitely going to be involved, is definitely following Elvis, and it's like, ooh, what's going to happen there? Eventually we get Joe Pike shows up, so we get his perspective. And one thing that's very nice about the book is that the characterization of the Elvis Cole chapters is very different from the Joe Pike chapters. At no point was I really bored or like, where's this going to go? I found the mystery interesting. I can really feel how this is like the 20th in the series. It feels like you can imagine moving through some of these other ones and him like handling different settings and different cases in a nice way. I think the reader could have like a couple different guesses on what's going on, and I think it would be fairly likely if they landed on the correct guess. It's not completely out of left field, but again, that's good. I don't think that's like a problem. The one critique that really comes to mind for me is some of the characterization around Joe Pike is a little bit goofy. Like I said, action guy. He wears sunglasses all the time. He has tattoos on his arms that look like arrows, which I think it's supposed to be sort of like a bullseye thing, or like, I'm coming at you. And I'm not sure. I assume that's discussed in like the previous books. He's a little bit zen. There's like periods where he's like, and he just sat. I don't know. It was a little bit funny. I kind of wish that they were gay. Yeah, I found his characterization a little bit goofy. Maybe it would feel differently if I had been with them for 20 other books. But I kind of think it's probably always been a little bit goofy.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know, I think he's like that type of action character, hero guy stereotype. So, depends on your tolerance for that. I was kind of okay with it. I don't know. Star-wise, 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think if you like Jack Reacher stuff, you'd like this? Cause,
probably.
Yeah.
It's definitely like falls in that category.
I mean, I guess it's like if the guy was like, I'm gonna call up my buddy Jack Reacher. Like the guy's maybe not as weird as Jack Reacher. I don't know. I haven't read it.
Yeah.
Jack Reacher's kind of a weird guy, but it's as if you could call up Mr. Jack Reacher.
Exactly. So I do think one of the things that helps with that is that basically he's called in because Elvis Cole got bonked too hard by the bad guys and is in the hospital. So I kind of liked, as somebody who's had like limitations previously.
You're always hitting your head.
I'm always hitting my head. I've had limitations before. I kind of like the quality of like the main character being like woozy.
Yeah.
And needing a friend to help out. Like that's good disability rep. So it was fun. I liked it. I don't know that it's going to be like my favorite of the 7. I would be potentially surprised, but I would consider reading other ones in the series. I think you would like it. Yeah. I don't know about you, viewer. I don't know who you are. But maybe I will. Tell me about yourself.
Yeah, leave it in the comments, your personal identifying information, and your credit card number and the 3 numbers on the back.
So next up, another book that I've already finished. So I'm just going to talk about it in a second. But first I'm going to pause the video. The next one I read was Fagin the Thief by Alison Epstein, which is published by Doubleday. And I was curious about this one. I was excited when I saw it. I've never read Oliver Twist. And this is an exploration of an Oliver Twist character. Were you familiar with Fagin?
I've heard of him.
So what's the main thing you know about Fagin?
Jewish. He's like a Shylock type or something.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like him and Shylock. The 2 most famous anti-Semitic characters in literature, probably. This is a reimagining of the events from Oliver Twist, but with Fagin being primary character that is explored further.
With that in mind, is he the viewpoint character?
Yeah, most of it, yeah.
I see.
So the way the book is structured is there's a few different parts, and we start in 1838, pretty much even with the beginning of how Oliver would have begun interacting with Fagin, sort of at that point in time. And then we go back to 1793 to Fagin's childhood. And one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is that actually in Oliver Twist, apparently Fagin doesn't have a first name. Charles Dickens doesn't give him one. So Alison Epstein does. She names him Jacob. Fagin's background is explored in a lot of different chapters. And so then it goes through his childhood, his early development into him being this figure that he is when we see him in Oliver Twist. And then it follows, I believe, pretty closely, it's sort of hard to say, the events that happen in Oliver Twist, which eventually lead towards like Fagin imprisoned. Because I didn't know Oliver Twist already, there were a lot of like open questions and sort of I wasn't sure exactly where the book was going to go, which made it really satisfying in a way.
Sure.
But it is very clear from early on that we are headed towards some sort of catastrophe. There isn't really going to be a happy ending for Fagin. It says, a thrilling reimagining of the world of Charles Dickens as seen through the eyes of the infamous Jacob Fagin, London's most gifted pickpocket, liar, and rogue. Striking out on his own, Jacob familiarizes himself with London's highest value neighborhoods while forging his own path in the shadows. Everything changes when he adopts an aspiring teenage thief named Bill Sykes, whose mercurial temper poses a danger to himself and anyone foolish enough to cross him. It's very much like a found family type story. So I did listen to an interview with Alison Epstein just to sort of deepen a little bit of my understanding of her approach and stuff. She describes Fagin's character in Oliver Twist characterized as this ominous Jewish figure who is going out on the street and like collecting up children to help him do his thievery, given like a very negative connotation, right? Like it's not like a good thing. And one of the things that happens in this book is more Fagin in his early years, he has like a mentor, a thief that he learns trade from, so to say. and then eventually moves on and doesn't need to be with that guy anymore. At a certain point, somebody tries to like steal from him, and he's like, "Ooh, you didn't do a very good job there. Let me like teach you, show you the ropes." It's less so this manipulative, mean thing where he's like collecting up children and being cruel and weird, but more he's established, he's experienced, he's very good at what he does, and there are others who are also just trying to like scrounge up as best of a living as they can in a world with very few options, with very like intense scarcity. He's trying to show them a better way to do things. As the book jacket I just read alludes to, one of the main figures that he eventually sort of brings into his life and is a mentor to is Bill Sikes, who is younger and has this really like nasty piece to him. Mm-hmm. And Jacob kind of thinks that he can try to be helpful to Bill, and then Bill will say something really nasty and kind of like intense back to him, and Jacob just sort of like scoot past it and like be like, well, maybe if I try to help him enough, Bill will understand that I'm trying to help him. Mm-hmm. But it's very clear from the outside that Bill always sort of sees every encounter as like somebody's a winner and somebody's a loser, and he's always going to be the winner. Mm-hmm. There were 2 parts that I wanted to read, like little sections. One of the things that spoiler alert, I'm going to give it 5 stars. It was really great. It was great. I loved it so much. I don't know exactly where it fits within the project focused on mysteries, but I did check. The Mystery Writers Association sort of says crime writing. So the term they use is crime writing, not mysteries. But one of the things that I liked a lot about this book is that it's beautifully written. So one section says,
"A person who is properly afraid of Bill would not be in Jacob's situation, would not be the one Nan comes to in times of crisis. He's not Bill's keeper, is not Bill's friend, is not Bill's father. Every time he tries to think of what Bill is to him and he to Bill, he is made aware anew of the vast holes in the English language, the voids into which the men society casts off can slip, and where they must form categories and semantics of their own. He is Bill's, and Bill is his, and no dictionary in the country can put the matter more precisely."
So that's one that I really liked. And then another one, which is later in the book when sort of some of the action has happened and sort of crisis, I believe, within Oliver Twist.
"Bill's head falls back in relief, as if Jacob could have sent him away, as if the years haven't braided their existences together, Jacob's and Bill's and London's, until it's impossible for Jacob to tell what is their own history and what is the city's, these streets that have always been home to them both. They are their own world and all the people in it too."
So it's like a very beautifully written book. A lot of it focuses on the relationship between Fagin and Bill, but also that's sort of like the relationship that has the crisis. But the backdrop is Fagin's relationship to sort of this area of London and to the community that he's sort of sketched out amongst it, like sort of where his place is. Mm-hmm. Informing that, though, are probably the most beautiful sections, which are about Fagin's childhood and his life with his mother, Leah. So Fagin in this story, I'm not sure like which parts were covered in Oliver Twist and which parts are Alison Epstein's writing, but his father died before he was born. His father was hung for thieving, and so he grows up with his mom, Laila, in the Jewish community. And for a long time, Jacob does, as a young child, doesn't really talk very much and is considered kind of odd. And he's very close with his mother, and they just, like, they're a pair going through the world, like it's them. And she reads to him, she talks to him, they explore sort of how to make sense of this world, and eventually she dies, and it's really sad. And she passes away when he's 13, but he's already sort of begun to explore criminality and gotten involved with less savory people. And his mother is sort of like his tie to, not quite virtue, but his tie that grounds him, that keeps him stable, that keeps him okay. And when she passes away, that's sort of like a big turn in his life. He suddenly feels this great loneliness, and it's like this thing that he can never quite fill, especially in a world that is so anti-Semitic and so cruel to people like him. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's very like touching is like when he's growing up within this Jewish community, he's there, and like in some ways he feels like an outsider, but then when he leaves it, he realizes like how much the anti-Semitism is going to like affect his life. He finds himself seen as something other and seen himself like disdained by people who are like living in poverty with him. It's a really beautiful book. It's very well written. It's very affecting. I really, really liked it. It's really, really nice. I would strongly recommend this. I think this is like, could be like a favorite, one of the favorites for like my reading year potentially. For Edgar Award, the category being best novel, interesting, and having now expanded my understanding that it's from the Mystery Writers Association, but the connective tissue is crime writing, which is like a little bit broader than mystery, I think, as like a genre or a subject. This certainly like fits. Crime is like the central thing going on, and it's like the water in which they swim. I think in terms of like a mystery where you're like, who done did it, especially if you've read Oliver Twist, I don't think there's going to be surprises. As somebody who hasn't read Oliver Twist and like isn't intimately familiar, there is a quality of like, I know that this is going towards something catastrophic, but I don't know what it is. What's going to happen here? This isn't going to go well. Something bad is going to happen. Really beautifully done. I do really recommend the audiobooks. We'll put in who the narrator was.
So how much does it make you want to read Oliver Twist? Like,
ooh, I think in some ways I would need some distance before I read Oliver Twist.
Sure,
I can't go straight into Oliver Twist.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would feel very odd to go from like this sort of richly depicted Fagin to a different Fagin. But it could be fun, you know? Maybe I'll discuss it at some point. So I think I would read Oliver Twist having done this, but it's hard to envision. I'm like, wow, Fagin's great. He's so cool. I mean, he's not cool. He's kind of sad and difficult, but I like Fagin, you know? And I don't think in Oliver Twist you're supposed to like Fagin.
Sure.
I think he's the villain.
Yeah, I'm sure like the perspective that would view it as more interesting to read this understanding the ways it's in conversation with Oliver Twist, like from a familiarity of with the source text. But it's nice that you were able to read this and have that element of novelty. Of,
I didn't have prejudice.
Like,
you know?
well, and like just the narrative working like in terms of you not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you liked it so much.
Yeah, it was beautiful. 5 stars. We're back. And I have finished the third book, which is The Dream Hotel by Laila Lalami. It's from Pantheon. The basic plot is, it's kind of like a near future type dystopian story. It's using themes that are present in our current circumstances related to data, surveillance. Did I say that weird?
A little bit.
Surveillance. And criminality, like identifying people as being at risk in some way of harming others. It's very different than some of the other things that were nominated. It follows Sarah Hussein, who is an archivist, and she is married to Elias, and they recently had twins. She had been traveling for a work convention, and she comes home, she lands in LAX, and as part of the sort of processing there, she goes through risk assessment administration, where agents from that borough retain her rather than detain. She's being retained because her risk score is a smidge too high. And now her risk score it's an algorithm based data point that pulls in information from something called her Dream Saver device. It's supposed to make you sleep better, and it also kind of records your dreams or like gathers up information from them. So based on her dream data, she has a risk score that is too high, and they've decided that she may be capable or liable to commit harm against her husband, Elias. She is retained, again, rather than detained. They use the term she is free under observation. She's not free. And taken to a retention center called Madison. The book follows her time in the retention center, where initially she's going to be retained for 21 days, but then for various reasons, time gets added on to that, and for some people end up being like retained for an extended period of time, ostensibly because of this idea of like the possibility of causing harm. She hasn't committed a crime, she hasn't done anything, but she's agreed to these terms of service, and in the interest of like protecting people, the US government has decided to like set this up. At one point during the novel, we get insight to the past and sort of how this may have have come about. And it's sort of like a combination between these corporations, such as the Dream Saver Corporation, the government sort of working together to do this, and the ways in which prisons in real life in the US are, people get rich off them. Do you know what I mean? Like corporations and stuff like that. It's a really interesting novel where it's kind of got these structures of institutionalization, and then it also has this very like dreamlike quality because we are hearing about Sarah's dreams and how she's relating to them. There are some parts of the novel that are dreams, and there's some parts that are like what's going on as she's going through this retention center. The things that like it really stood out for me was the way that dreams as a topic really highlights this uncanny feeling where for her it's hard to believe what's happening is what's happening. Even though as a woman of color, she does reference previous experiences and familiarity with being marginalized and sort of profiled, including like at the airport. So like for instance, Laila Lalami choosing the airport as where this happens, I think is very appropriate. There's this uncanny feeling that's being amplified throughout. And then there's also a strong sense of not knowing yourself or others. And so she has to spend a lot of time because of how the institutionalization works, sort of like checking her thoughts, analyzing herself and questioning like, is this dream I'm having posing a risk? How do I interpret things? How do I hold up this guard? How do I keep trying to defend myself against sort of like this indefensible thing? Because dreams are just like cuckoo bananas, right? It brings in this thing where like every raw thought is being brought up against her. It plays with dreams, it plays with memory. It also does have some mixed media. Most of it's through her perspective, either contemporaneous with her being at the retention center or flashbacks, but occasionally we get transcripts, we get documents, we get meetings happening like with the Dream Saver people, other things going on, which I really liked. I love mixed media type of thing. It's really interesting. I strongly recommend it. It doesn't have a whodunit element of some mysteries on this list too. Talking about genres is so tricky and I have trouble with it. Very literary fiction emphasis more than like the mystery emphasis, because we do know what's happened. We don't know how she's going to navigate what's happened. Will she be okay? Are some like ominous edges sometimes. So like for instance, she doesn't know what a lot of what's going on with her husband. There are these little edges of uncertainty. Laila Lalami talks in her acknowledgements about how she applied a lot of research to this project. She says, in writing this novel, my eye was on the future, but my research was into the past. And she references a few specific useful texts. I thought it was really beautifully written. It had a very nice, like, slippery quality. It was a little bit unsettling at times. A lot of us have had that experience of having a dream that is unnerving and feels uncomfortable. And so like take that feeling and then like amplify it by like a lot, where instead of that being like a private experience that you have that feels unsettling, it becomes something that's public and then it's also used against you. Feels invasive in a specific way. Very good. 4 or 5 stars, something like that.
That's cool that it gives that, successfully renders that unsettling feeling. That sounds very interesting. For some readers, might it be like scary? Is it like horror, you know?
I don't think it's like horror exact. Scary in the ways that it like presses on themes that we see in our current reality. So for instance, data control and like when you agree to things, like how is your data used? So like for instance, period trackers that people might use, that data is not safe to share. In some parts of the US. It is not a tool that is given without these strings tied to it. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that the Dream Saver device that helps you sleep better, well, for some people, the need to sleep better might in part be informed by like they maybe have to work harder than other people, like their economic instability, and having the ability to sleep better could make a huge difference, but then their data compromised and used in these malicious ways. So I haven't watched much Black Mirror, but it feels like that sort of similar thing where it's not exactly horror, but it has this, as I said, like an ominous edge that can be really unsettling. The Dream Hotel, really good. I would recommend it. I think it would have a pretty broad appeal, especially as it takes on a lot of interesting themes that are really relevant to our current situation as well. All right, we're switching up locale. This is Benji, currently reading Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. I am about 250 out of 300 pages in, and fam, I'm not liking it. not the book
Oh,
for
you're
me.
almost done?
Yeah, I'm almost done. I'm a fast reader.
Well, there's still time for it to turn around.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Always optimistic. Wild Dark Shore was kind of hard to get from the library. It's published by Flatiron Books. It's sort of got environmental semi-dystopia vibe, but not quite. So it's like near future vibes, where there's like lots of additional climate catastrophe stuff going on. We've got a lot of different perspectives. Our main characters are Rowan, who is a woman at the beginning of the book. She is drowning. She doesn't die. And she is rescued at this island, like this remote island near Antarctica, where Dominic Salt is a man who is the caretaker of this island, where he lives with his 3 children. So there's Fen, who is a daughter, like an older teenage daughter. There's Rafe, who is a teenage son. And then there's Orly, who is a like 9-year-old son.
Okay.
And they live there, where they are caretakers of the island, which has like lots of birds and stuff and animals, seals, that sort of thing. But it also has a seed library, you know, like for catastrophe and stuff like that. They are making sure it's okay. But they're the only ones there. There used to be like research people there as well. And so it's a little bit sus why they're the only ones there. It's a little bit sus why Rowan was nearby. It's not as if there were any other things nearby for her to be trying to get to. There's question marks. It's a very atmospheric book with switching perspectives, where we're kind of like, what is this lady trying to do? What has this family done? What's going on? Everything's sus. I'm almost finished. We'll find out how I feel about it. Earlier I was trying to read it and I was literally falling asleep, sitting straight up. So
time for it to turn around.
Yeah, time for it to turn around.
Yeah.
So I'll check back in shortly with the review portion. Bye. Bye. Boy. Boy. Oop, big stretch. It wasn't going well at first, but I finished Wild Dark Shore. I had to like drag myself through. Dominic Salt, his 3 kids with the weird names, and Rowan are doing stuff. They're surviving, but they're also getting ready to leave the island and shut down the seed bank. And that's the stuff. The whodunit, the mystery question is, why is Rowan here? The mystery question is, what happened to the researchers? Why are Dominic Salt and his kids being kind of weird? That kind of thing. There's also like kind of ghost vibes. There's a ghost situation. Dominic Salt is a widower, and the way he talks about his wife, it's very ghost vibes, and his kids talk in very ghost vibes. Lots of ghost vibes. In terms of like sort of structure and like how the book is set up, there are different points of view. We have Rowan, Dominic Salt, and then each of his kids. So 5 points of view. And then I think at one point we get somebody else, one of the researchers. It's got very climate catastrophe. It's something that Rowan is concerned about in her personal life prior to her coming to the island. And it's also the theme around like what's going on with the island and like the seed bank and why it's being shut down. And then there's the ghost stuff and there's nature stuff. If you like those things, you might like this book. I really didn't like it at all. I'll just show real quick a piece of my notes. Normally what I do is I do a little sad face and a happy face, things that I liked or things that I didn't like. For this book, it's just little angry faces.
Oh, wow.
You know, they have the little furrowed brow.
I see.
Here's my problem with this book. So it's maybe about like 360 pages long. I would say most of it is atmosphere rather than substance. Like, it's the sort of thing where you can just skim past so many pages. Just skim. I wasn't skimming, but like you could skim and you'd be okay. Very atmospheric. Like, I don't mind some of that. I think that can be really good, especially for like mystery and like crime. An isolated mystery, yeah, you need some atmosphere. That needs to be like a very key part of it when you're choosing a setting like this. But to me, the atmosphere was more talking about nature and climate catastrophe rather than building into the mystery. The other problem with that, so we've got like 5, maybe 6 points of view, but they all read very similarly. Rowan and Dominic had very similar ways of talking. It was just like 2 sides of the same coin. He's like, why is she here? And she's like, why is he being weird? And then all of the kids had a very similar way of talking. They were just into different parts of nature. Orly likes the seeds. Fen likes the seals. Raph likes the whales. But they all kind of talk similar, think similar, and approach things similar. The difference is Orly reads like a Wikipedia page. The children are treated as like mystical. Orly isn't just like into seeds. He's into seeds in like a mystical way. Fen isn't just into seals. She's into seals in a mystical way. She's sort of practically a seal.
Communion with the earth.
Yeah. I would have found it much more interesting if the author also wrote about them as children. They felt like these little like ghosty creatures. They were just as substantive as the ghosts. Yeah, that's right. I said it.
Damn.
The other problem that I have is we've got Rowan, and Rowan is our character who's like most driven to find out the whodunit, what happened type of thing of something going on. At one point, she discovers the possibility of a crime and she suspects something bad happened. I forgot to say that Rowan finds some blood. That's relevant, and I'm going to mention it later. About 10 pages later, there's a crisis, and it's like, oh my god, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Where the group kind of comes together to experience that crisis and react to it. And then she's basically like, what blood? For an extended period of time. She's no longer thinking about it. And then she's like, oh yeah, I was suspecting something had happened. And that's like a bunch of pages later, and she's like, oh, blood, there was blood. A novel of breathtaking twists, dizzying beauty, of ferocious love, Wild Dark Shore, is about the impossible choices we make to protect the people we love, even as the world around us disappears. Okay, no, it's not. It's about vibes. This lady's sticking her head in the sand for a while and pretending like, oh, what do you mean the purpose I was here for? And then like continuing on. I have a lot of problems with this book. I really didn't like it. I don't recommend it. It's on like all these lists to take on like narrative questions around climate catastrophe. I think that's great. I think you should also have a well-written book. Do you know what I mean? I think like the structure should still make sense. For me, when there's different points of view, I want to get something from each point of view and not just like a different way of looking at the same thing, but I want their worldview to be different or their outlook. I want something to be different. And in this, the differences were so minute, you know, like it was just like, is it seeds or is it seals?
Sure. Well, it certainly sounds like you feel that the Dream Hotel engaged much more successfully with a theme of future anxiety, namely like sort of data panopticon anxiety, than did this book with the theme of climate anxiety.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is the Dream Hotel is like pulling in a lot of themes and like building something up, and we can even see that in the acknowledgments that Laila Lalami talks about. Whereas Wild Dark Shore to me feels much more about how do these people who miraculously have all the same outlook on life choose each other and build a family together despite the impending climate catastrophe and doom. It feels very like I'm gonna still be a mom type stuff. Feels more about personal choice in the face of like climate anxiety. I didn't feel like it pushed me to think critically, except for my hatred of the vibe.
The way you're describing it, it sounds like, okay, so as you're saying, like a lot of tone setting for the whole novel, and then at the end, is there some rush to like resolution of our thing?
The action around like the mystery and the whodunit, what happened here, only happens in like the last 60 pages.
Sure, but I'm curious about those 60 pages. Like, so okay, they feel rushed. Are they at least like functional and arrive at something close?
Yeah, like
it's not left open-ended or something.
You get a resolution. You have some action. You have some like, oh, what's gonna happen?
Okay,
and it goes somewhere. It falls away from the vibe, and I think those were the better part of the book.
Yeah.
Because it's also doing something. It's not just creating the atmosphere and the isolation and like, oh, climate vibes and here's some ghosts and here's this.
It just didn't feel so good after the 300 previous pages.
You could just skim a lot. Whereas the Dream Hotel, you can't be skimming there.
I'm sorry that you didn't like it.
Yeah. 1 star?
Well.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So I finished Hard Town. It is a sequel to his first novel, The Ascent. The Ascent I haven't read, so Hard Town still worked for me. It narratively made sense. There were some references to what happened in The Ascent, but he did a really good job of summarizing what happened there without being like too summarizing. The Ascent does sound really cool.
Yeah, I looked it up briefly. It did sound pretty cool, huh? It sounded like a little bit like The Raid-y.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The Raid is like an action series fight movie. I didn't know that going into Hard Town. I didn't really know anything about it at all. It makes sense to me that his previous novel had a very fight vibe because some of the strongest parts of this are around the fight sequences. So our main character is Kurt Argento, who is a former Detroit cop. He's also a widower. His wife died of cancer. He sort of like is a little bit untethered, especially since his wife has died. He has a dog named Hudson, and he is a Lutheran. That's part of his story as well. He is house sitting in a small town in Arizona. He's there with his dog and just doing odd jobs in the town. He's living low key, right? At the beginning of the novel, then, a young woman named Kristen Reed and her baby son, that she's carrying, approach him, and she asks Kurt for help finding her husband, who has been missing for a period of time. And he was last seen in a nearby town called Fenton. Fenton is the primary stage for our whole novel, and it's like it is potentially the titular town. It's really like odd to him. So he goes and he checks it out. Initially, he wasn't really gonna pick up this job because that's not the type of work he's doing, but he is convinced enough that he's at least gonna go to the town and meet her there. But when he goes to meet her, she doesn't show. And he's concerned about why. He has limited information, but he just finds it a little bit odd. And so he decides that he's gonna sort of just like stick around just a little bit. And as he's sticking around, Fenton, the town, seems really odd. So it's very isolated, which is fine. Small towns exist. But it has really limited public services. So whereas he would normally like inquire with like the local police and say like, hey, there's a missing case, like what's going on? That kind of thing. He can't do that because they have, instead of a first responders like public services, that kind of thing, there are no actual police, there's no fire department, there's no ambulance or anything. Instead, what Fenton has is a public safety team, which is made up of 9 guys, ex-military type, really aggro, and like for instance talks to one of them and he has like a piece of paper for the missing guy and he says, can I put this up on your town bulletin, which is oddly empty, but he puts it up and then the guy like crumples it up and throws it out. Just weird things going on. A diner, and he wants to go eat at the diner, but when he goes to the diner there's just this like one guy and the other public safety team people, the soldiers, and they're like, the diner's closed, you can't come in. And so he's like staying there for a little bit and he's like, this is kind of weird, but whatever. I'm just gonna see if she shows up, what happens. But then the public safety team gets more aggressive with him and more intense and off-putting to the point that like he really keys that something wrong is going on. Like he is like, this is like these circumstances, especially now that the woman and her baby have gone missing, he's like, this is like very odd. He finds out that there's also a official, like governmental official, they're running this project, so it's somehow sanctioned officially, but it's really weird and kind of scummy. It gets more and more ominous. And then he and his dog Hudson are going to leave the town when it escalates even further. Something bad happens enough that like everything like immediately escalates into aggression between him and this group. And they are going to become overtly harmful to him and his dog Hudson, and it's not good. He's motivated to put things right and figure out what happened, but he also kind of just doesn't care anymore too, like an additional degree of, I'm gonna just like burn this all down. That's the main thing that's going on. It does bring in themes around cartels and like gang violence and like drugs and stuff like that. Also like a question of what's a public good versus a private tragedy. Is it okay to do really horrible things in the service of some greater good? Who are your bedfellows, kind of like that sort of thing. Argento is mostly working on his own throughout the novel, and in some parts that meant that as a reader I did find it like a little bit slow, but at a certain point, he makes unconventional sort of collaborative choices in trying to like respond to the weirdness in Fenton. And he crosses some lines and he changes the rules a little bit, even within his own sort of like how he approaches the world. And I think that's a really compelling thing. And one of the things that the author talks about in his acknowledgments is wanting to like push himself further as a writer and sort of do a story where things aren't like clean and tidy, but rather like it gets messy and out of control. This does a good job of that, especially for the action sequences that happen later on. He has very well done like set pieces where fight scenes are succinct but also interesting. Like you have like a strong visceral reaction. You're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? It feels like tactically informed, but then it still is like narratively engaging. The other thing it does is so there's 2 points of view. Most time we're with Argento as he's navigating this situation, but then we do occasionally get the flip side, which is the point of view of the mysterious man who's in Fenton that the public safety team is responsible for. The impression very quickly is that he's sort of like this very sort of smartest man in the world, but doesn't have a moral center. He's a little bit repulsive, but he's working on some sort of project, and so it's very clear that he's like the center pole to what's going on in Fenton. It was hard for me to get into it at times. I kind of wish that I had the audiobook available. But then the action sequences really played off, and I think for sort of like a action thriller type scenario, it's really well written, and the author has this character making these choices that are sort of like existential in a nice way.
No, the first book, as we sort of mentioned, sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
I guess it's more it sounds like it's more high concept than this one. This one seems like it's
this one has some like high concept elements. So part of like the high concept is, what if you were kind of like this lone wolf figure up against this seemingly government sanctioned project, but man has gone missing, and then his young wife and child have gone missing.
Sure.
And then these people around this government sanctioned project have also done something violent to the main character in a really sketchy way. What do you do? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are your options there? So I think the author kind of likes just positioning Argento in these sort of like high risk situations where against the odds where Argento needs to somehow gather in his resources, and in this he very strongly feels like he doesn't have enough resources to do what he needs to do. Like draw on his resources and move forward somehow against like kind of what seem like impossible odds. I haven't read this yet, but it feels like it's in a different setting and tone type thing where the sensation is different for the main character. I am interested in the scent to see what it's like. You can see some of the things being set up nicely in this one, where I don't think you would have to read the next book, but like there's some threads where you're like, ooh, you know, that's going to come up later. And I think it would be interesting to see what the author does with this character now that he's sort of pushed him past some of his internal moral lines.
Whereas the first one, like on the inside flap, it sounds like, for example, you know, it's like, hey, and something that we can compare this to is Die Hard, the first one. And the second one, like I'm pretty sure, like mentions, you know, if you like the Jack Reacher novels, you know, because this does sound very reminiscent, you know, like coming to this sort of ethereal, sort of symbolic little American town that works in some extremely particular way, and then investigating. And you said that the fight scenes were like a standout, and that, I mean, that is something I think I've read like a couple of the Jack Reacher books. I think that's something they have that is a strength there. So I mean, it definitely sounds like this delivers a lot of like the things that would be appealing in like a good Jack Reacher type book.
One of the things that I was thinking about, so in my other Edgars video, I talk about the Kevin Wade Johnny Careless book, where I don't really like it very much because I feel as if the author isn't pushing the narrative on critiquing the institutions in which his like, characters exist, and is like too sort of permissive in a way. I do think like this author, especially like being a police officer himself, has a perspective, right? And that comes through. But in this story, the institutions are doing something sort of like corrupting and bad, right? There is a tension there that I think is nice. But I was trying to I was asking of myself, does that critique that I have there, how does that come through here as well? And it does to some extent. I think it helps that this is a book that's doing something else excellently, whereas Johnny Careless for me wasn't doing something else really well.
Sure, it's maybe thinking more about what can go wrong with people in institutions, right?
Yeah.
Which, I guess is interesting in the same way that what can go wrong with an individual's thinking and flaws, right? That's something interesting to explore in fiction. And similarly, it's interesting to explore how groups can go wrong and how abuse happens, right? And how bad practices happen. That's a good theme. That's an interesting theme.
Yeah, easily recommendable to the right reader, as all books, except for Wild Dark Shore.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. There's no right reader for that. I don't know. It seems like
I'm sure there is.
There probably is, but I'm not going to recommend it to them.
These videos don't contain objective aesthetic criterions. We talk about books based on our subjective experience of them.
Yeah. So the next one is The Inheritance by Trisha Sakhlecha from Viking. This is a little bit more traditional mystery type story. So the basics are, it follows this ultra wealthy Agrawal family who split their time between London and Delhi. The story is centered around their gathering at a small remote Scottish island that one of the children in the family has purchased, owned, and is building a hotel. So there's Papa, there's Mama, there's Myra, Asim, and Aisha, and then Asim's wife, Zoe, who is one of our point of view characters. The family is reuniting at this island that's owned by the daughter, Myra. She's been a attorney for the family. They are gathering because Papa is on the brink of retirement. He's had some medical emergencies recently where it's been necessary for the son, Asim, to be more involved in the family's business. As Asim's been called into the business and Papa has had these medical issues, they've been considering the idea of Papa retiring and they might sell the company. And that's going to change the financial structure of their family, which currently is structured as Papa has all the wealth and he gives out the money to everybody else periodically as they request it. The new structure would mean that the children in the family would have more direct access to money, the family's money. So that's what the purpose of the reunion is. At the beginning of the book, we open with a brief chapter that says now. And it's a woman running through what we presume eventually is the island wilderness, and the perspective character mentions a dead body, and it's clear that something has happened. And then we go to 3 days before, and it's Zoe, the daughter-in-law in the family's perspective. And Zoe, the daughter-in-law that's married into the family, and Myra are the two primary points of view. And then occasionally we also have the now point of view. So we are clearly working towards something has happened, but we don't know what's going to get us there. The big themes going on are sort of the different motivations for people and how they relate to each other, and also how they relate to the family, especially since there's this financial thing going on. How does Papa relate to each of his children and their partners about the finances? How does Papa relate to the idea of this company that he's built up for many years, this huge thing being sold off? The plan is for it to be sold off to one of his competitors. Plays into these different motivations. And for instance, Zoe, she's the daughter-in-law, and she has a really bad relationship with her mom. Her family wasn't wealthy. It was definitely living paycheck to paycheck. How she fits within the family, this ultra rich family, is really informed by that experience of precarity that she's had before. And while she has an abundance now, she also feels this pressure. How do they build a life together? There's a lot of tensions in what different people want, and there's this real sense of there's always somebody who's an outsider a little bit, doesn't quite fit. So for instance, while the family loves Zoe, they also maybe sometimes find her a little bit annoying, or she has a different perspective that they don't like, or maybe they think Aisha, the youngest daughter, is spoiled and just wants to get away with everything and doesn't want to be responsible, and there's these different little family gripes and stuff. And there's also a sense of what do you owe the family and the family kind of owns you. You're not like your own person, but like you're somebody who there's lots of like secrets and different motivations. We know that somebody is going to die. We know that it's going to be violent. I found it to be very like effective. Stories that center on ultra wealthy families, in some ways there can be like a trickiness with that too, where like, why are you concerned about like, how are you going to get money to support your private island? Stuff like that, where the problems that we have are not actual problems, It's not really an eat the rich type narrative.
Okay.
But it was a nice story. I liked it. It had like a good twist and sort of like, that was satisfying and like a good time. Yeah, I would recommend it. It was solid. Fairly like traditional mystery type thing. Not too much to say about it, but it was good.
It's more about figuring out a specific crime rather than sort of revealing the grand conspiracies that everyone's involved with.
Yeah, specific crime, a specific act of violence is going to happen. Who's going to do it?
Okay.
How's that going to come to pass? And how will the family react to the violence? It was solid. Good time. Our last book. I actually listened to this one. Presumed Guilty by Scott Turow, which is from Grand Central Publishing. So Presumed Guilty is a squeakle squeakle. It's the third in the Rusty Savage series from Scott Turow. Though I think he has like a lot of books set in this like area. And this it's a legal thriller. So in this story, Rusty, he's 77. He has been like a prosecutor. He's been a judge. He's like nearing retirement. He's slowing down. Has a fiance named B, and she's educator in the small town that they live in Kendall County. And B has a young son, I think maybe like 26, something like that, who she adopted. He's Black. I think B has some mixed race in her background, but it's not a big part of her life or experience. Like, it's further back. This is a county in which most of the county is white. Aaron, B's son, he is on probation at the start of the novel for drug-related offenses. Rusty is like, I think, the only perspective that we get, and it's like very much like grounded in his point of view as like older white legal guy. So Aaron is Rusty's fiance's son, so he kind of like relates to him in a familial but slightly distant way. This is going to be his third marriage. Rusty already has like grown children of his own who have their own children, and while he feels familial to Aaron, he's like not a stepfather or anything like that. Rusty still has like responsibilities to him, especially because Aaron is living at their home under supervision during this probation period. At the beginning of the novel, they're trying to get in touch with Aaron and they aren't able to reach him. And it turns out Aaron is on like a little camping trip with his on again, off again girlfriend, May, who is blonde white, and she is the daughter of the local prosecutor. May also has had previous issues with drugs. The sort of like overall presentation of her at the beginning and like throughout the book is that she is very like bright and charismatic, but also very troubled and has a hard time navigating the world. It's very clear that the relationship between Aaron and May is very turbulent. They've known each other for a really long time. They've grown up together and they love each other very intensely, but aren't necessarily good for each other. Aaron comes back from that camping trip and he actually has May's phone, and he's like, we were on this trip and she just like spent all our time on her phone and like making fun of me, and I just got so frustrated with her, and like it's clear like it didn't go well. They broke up on the trip. But then May's missing for an extended period of time, and because Aaron is on probation, his lawyer recommends that like if he talks to the police about May, that he should just have like a lawyer present, or he should have like some legal protections because of the probation. But that sends up like alarm bells for May's family, especially given that her father is like the local prosecutor and they never really got on well with Aaron. And so they assume that he did something. And as the title suggests, Aaron is really like presumed to be guilty. Most of the novel follows the legal proceedings as Rusty is Aaron's lawyer and is trying to navigate this situation and keep Aaron safe as safe can be given the circumstances. Most of the book takes place in the courtroom and deals with the evidence of the case, how Aaron is being perceived, especially in this predominantly white community as a young black man, and how the prosecution is approaching him and stuff like that. I did find it like very nice. I do like a courtroom drama type situation. I had not read the other Scott Turow, Rusty Savage books, but I'm like familiar enough with them. I don't think it requires being familiar with the previous ones. There are some like references to Rusty's previous experiences. I think he was charged for a crime that he didn't commit. He is used to being on like the side of the prosecution and like working with the courts, but he's also used to it not going well and there being like missteps and like miscarriages of justice. We get enough context clues to understand that like informs his approach, but he also like doesn't know what happened to May. He doesn't have the ability to prove something else happened. He's trying to show enough reasonable doubt. I thought it was good. You know, I'm not gonna be like, ooh, I love this. This is like a favorite book exactly. But for a legal thriller, Scott Turow did a really great job of making it compelling, making it interesting throughout. I wanted to like find out what would happen next. It felt very cinematic and very easy to read, and you're like, the court stuff was good, the investigation stuff was good. There is an interesting element where Aaron's character, especially because we stay with Rusty pretty much the whole time, Aaron's character is sort of like, he feels a little bit lost, like we don't get in touch with him too much because we only reach him through Rusty, who's this older lawyer dude. We get kind of very specific types of interactions with Aaron. Scott Turow is taking on like the topic of racial discrimination and presumption of guilt without centering the character who's experiencing it. I think it would be interesting to have a version of this book that at some point centers Aaron's perspective a bit more and decenters Rusty, but I also like, I understand having a singular perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not I kind of like miss that sometimes in books exactly, but then like you're gonna miss what you don't have. Yeah. If there were a film adaptation of this or like TV adaptation, I would look forward to having more of Aaron's point of view. I
was Googling briefly, it seems like the previous presumed titles with Rusty Savage weren't in the community where he lives in this one where he's retired. Do you think the setting was utilized well or comes across nicely? Like,
it definitely has like a sense of these small town influences. So May's father is the local prosecutor in this one small town or this county. The trial is happening in this other county over here, but Aaron's access to lawyers is hampered by the fact that like people don't want to get on the bad side of the local prosecutor. How do you have justice happen in these small towns? So like for instance, like even like jury selection. And I think that was well done. It really builds up a picture of how the lawyers have to interact with each other on an ongoing basis. Yeah. In also sometimes a politicized basis.
I'm going to guess that this is like a pretty pure legal thriller because Rusty is 77 years old, and so probably isn't like
he's not
getting up
around.
to like a bunch of like hijinks.
No.
Yeah. So this is like, you know, full on legal thriller. Walking and shuffling files.
Yeah, nobody's running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, you know, when something's purely what it is also, you know?
Yeah. Those are the 7 books I read.
Did you want to rank the books or something?
Yeah, I'll try to rank the books.
Okay.
I don't think I can rank the books.
Okay.
Because
we know what would be last.
Yeah, so Wild Dark Shore is definitely last. Okay. And then it's sort of like interesting. I think this category, and maybe in part because it's like 7 books instead of 5, but it really emphasizes to me like how distinctive things can be. Like I don't know how they're gonna pick a winner, with the exception of Wild Dark Shore. I think everything was doing what it wanted to do well. There were some that I enjoyed more than others. So like in terms of like in personal enjoyment, the one that I liked the best was definitely Fagin the Thief. I loved that. Maybe next would be like The Dream Hotel.
You did seem to like
I really liked The Dream Hotel. But then The Inheritance, Hard Town, The Big Empty, and Presumed Guilty are all doing their version of crime writing in a nice way.
Yeah. So we've learned that mystery. It's wide ranging. It's sort of like, hey, best fruit. What was the best fruit? And there's an apple, there's an orange, and you're like, well, it's apples and oranges.
You know, like
But we're rooting. Yeah. So we'll be rooting for Fagin the Thief.
I don't even know if I'm rooting for Fagin the Thief.
Yeah. All right.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard because like okay, well Fagin the Thief. It's like.
Well, you liked it so much.
I liked it so much, and it was like really beautifully written, and it's like nice, but like.
Oh, is
like,
it because it's not
the
mystery
genre
enough?
question? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah,
Well, you
maybe
know who
I
you're
would
not
say if I was.
voting for.
Well, I know who I'm not voting for, so maybe that's the real friend we made along the way. Was who we're not voting for. And I actually do think my friend asked me like why was I still reading Wild Dark Story if I wasn't liking it so much. But I do think it taught me a lot about what I don't like in a nice way.
Yeah, which is
I you know, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think it's possible I would root for the Dream Hotel. Yeah, I don't know. They were good. Those are the books.
Nice.
Yeah. Do you think you would want to read any of them?
Fagin the Thief definitely sounds interesting. We should listen to we could listen to the audiobook of The Ascent. That sounds cool.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I know that was the previous one to one of the ones we just talked about. I think Fagin the Thief, maybe
I want to buy Fagin the Thief.
Sure, and maybe Hardtown would be the ones that sort of the friendliest ones to like my interest. Fagin the Thief one definitely, especially because of its historical relationship to a classic text, everything. And like I've read Jack Reacher books, so something that sounds like the Jack Reacher one would be good. The Big Empty was the that sounds fun too, probably. Yeah, I mean, or so maybe something in that series, you know.
What do you think about in some ways like a long list or a short list feels much more informative than the singular winner?
Right.
Just like with films, you know, like what's best picture.
Right, and then the Dream Hotel, like. I mean, I'm not always so likely to go for something that's more that like specific profile of, you know, of more on occasion, like more literary fiction. Like your praise of it, like obviously carries weight. In particular, you mentioning that like it successfully evokes a very particular and strong feeling of that unsettling. Yep. That sounds like it would be worth experiencing. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Please let us know if you've read any of these books. Which one was your favorite? If you read more than one, or which one you think you might like. Yeah, how do you feel about Edgar Awards?
What's the best fruit, in your opinion?